So good evening, everybody, or good afternoon, good night, good morning. We're a global organization. This is the Austrian Economics Monthly, and this is the series of webinars or seminars that are organized by the Austrian Economics Council, based in Vienna, and Competre, based in Italy, in Rome. And I'm Pietro Paganini. I'm the chair of these events. I have the luck to chair all these events. And I have to say they have been a success. We have always touched and discussed interesting economic topics, usually, or social topics. And this time we decided to go back in time instead of always looking in the future, but to go back and look in the past. And you remember me being Italian when I was a swimmer. You know, I was a swimmer. It didn't look like, but I was a swimmer. And I was a teenager, and I was swimming in a race, and on my sides I had a young person like me from Germany and another person from the DDR. And you know, back then it sounded normal. And a few months later, these two entities became one entity. And for an Italian, that, you know, for a teenager, that was not a news. But it became later, eventually, when I finally grew up. Hopefully I grew up, and we think about Germany. And today, let me introduce my speaker to celebrate the 30 years anniversary of the reunification of Germany. And today we think about Germany as one nation that, according to many, is leading and driving Europe. According to many, is too much leading and driving Europe. According to some others, is not enough what Germany is doing. But certainly it's the largest nation in the European Union. I know the other nation in Europe, because we're still culturally divided, disagree with what I'm saying, but Germany is there as one country. But you know, in these 30 years, a lot has happened. And some question came to us: has this unification really worked? Or there are still some challenging and some problems due to reunification? And second, what is the meaning of the reunification for Europe? What has changed, in particular in building Europe? And third, and that's a question that I wanted to add to our discussion, is what is the impact of Germany to Europe, and how is Germany contributing to build the next European Union? And we do it with 4 speakers, no more 3 speakers. We have 4, so we have very contingent time, because we're talking about Germany. So I know for sure that we can respect the timing. And as usual, we have 45 minutes. We can take some extra time to get to the hours, but please, let's try to be in the 45 minutes, because our policy is time is important and we don't want to waste it. Okay, so let me start with our first speaker. His name is Günther Schnabel, and I apologize for my pronunciation, but as you know, we are talking about Germany, and I don't speak a single word of German. So Günther is professor at University of Leipzig. So Günther, you have my 3 questions. You have 5 minutes. The floor is entirely yours. Here you are.
Okay, thank you for the invitation. So I will give now my income statement. So first of all, the German unification was necessary. It was inevitable, and it was the only solution for Germany, providing a positive perspective for all Germans. But wrong promises were made, and also mistakes were made, in specific in the context of a German Economic, Monetary and Social Union of July 1990, because the conversion rate between the Eastern and Western German mark was set on an exchange rate of 1-to-1, which was far too high for the Eastern German productivity level. And at the same time, we had attempts to make the wage levels converge. And this mainly led to the collapse of most Eastern German enterprises, with very strong implications for Eastern Germany. First, hiking unemployment up to 18% by 2005. This is official unemployment. There was also a lot of hidden unemployment. And linked to the collapse of the Eastern German enterprises, also a very large loss of population, many young qualified people moving out, with a population of Eastern Germany decreasing from 14.4 million in 1991 to 12.6 million in the last year. The cost of the German unification process was a very strong real wage repression for whole Germany, which set in the late 1990s and which mainly ended in the year 2015. And this real wage repression process came along with a creation of a very large low wage sector in Germany, in specific in Eastern Germany. Since 1999, and now we move to the context of a German unification for the European monetary integration, we observe that unified Germany does not fit into the European monetary union, because it mainly follows a different business cycle than the rest of the European monetary union. The reform process setting in Germany in the late 1990s, combined with interest rate cuts of the ECB starting from 2009, lead to very strong capital outflows from Germany to Southern Europe and other southern European countries, which first nurture consumption boom and speculation, finally leading into the European financial and debt crisis. And since the European financial and debt crisis, Southern Europe needs a lot of transfers from Germany, which are again in a conflict with the German intra-German convergence process. Taking stock now, we see that the attempt that income levels between Eastern and Western Germany would converge has totally failed. GDP per capita in Western Germany is today around 43,500 euros. In the Eastern German parts, it's only around 30,000 euros. Gross wages per employed per year is 500,000 euros in the West and 28,300 euros in the East only. And the tax revenues in Eastern Germany about the half of Western Germany. So convergence has totally failed due to the inability to adjust the exchange rate between Eastern and Western Germany, despite a strong divergence in productivity levels. And I'm afraid that this is an important lesson also for the European Monetary Union, because also in the European Monetary Union, we have strongly divergent productivity levels, with Southern Europe becoming increasingly dependent on transfers from the north, in specific Germany.
Thank you so much, Gunther. I have to remind everybody as well, particularly the people that are following us on Zoom, that there are also other people and other audience that is following us over Facebook. And of course, they can, from today, actually, we can receive questions from the Zoom panel, and as well from today from Facebook. Thanks to Martin that will take and divert to us all the questions that are coming through Facebook. I also want to remind that our seminars are always recorded and will remain forever available, at least forever, as long as the internet exists, so you can watch it again, or they will be available for people that could not be here with us. And we know that there are a lot of people that cannot join us all the time, and therefore they enjoy watching the videos. They will be socialized. So please, once you know that the videos are online, help us them and making them available to a higher number of people. I also have to apologize because I see that my internet today is not working very well. And you know what's the paradox? Since I'm in Italy, that when I'm in the countryside, the internet works well. When I'm in the city, the internet doesn't work very well. So Italy is always on the contrary of the rest of you are talking about Germany. So I want to move to Clemens Schneider from Prometheus. Don't ask me to pronounce the rest of your title because I cannot pronounce it, and I take all the blame for that. So we got, I would say, an important lesson as a European, as an Italian, about the problems of the German reunification, and the sort, if you, Gunther, you allow me, a sort of pessimist, but it's very interesting because you said clearly it's a lesson that we can learn when we think about the European enlargement or the European monetary system. Clemens, do you have the same view? Do you share as Gunther this sort of pessimistic, based on facts, of course, pessimistic view?
Well, thank you for introducing me, Pietro. First of all, I won't go too much into the field of economics because I have a renowned economist speaking ahead of me, so my expertise would be marginally less good. I'm just going to focus on a different perspective. And let me first remind you that it might be 30 years of unification, but it's also 150 years of unification that we are commemorating these days. And Germany has always been a very, very pluralistic and diverse country, forged out of dozens of different parts. And some of the things that still affect Germany today come from a time when Germany was unified the first day and not the second time 30 years ago. So I think one major challenge we are facing in Germany is the still existing political division. So whereas in the West, parties that are on the margin or on the border of the normal party system, on the right, the AfD, and on the left, the Linke, are doing like normally as in any other European country, probably. In the East, they take a lot of voter share. So it ranges from 34% in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, which is in the very north of the East, up to 54% in Thüringen, which is in the south of the East. So in Thüringen, we have the situation that two parties which are not completely in the spectrum of constitutionally sound parties have a majority. Even though one must admit that in the Linke in Eastern Germany often has a little more of a pragmatic approach and can be seen as left-wing social democrats. But still, there is a divide. And I think part of this divide is that the people in the East expect something else and maybe a little bit more from politicians than those in the Western parts or the Southern parts. And because they expect more, they are also more easily disappointed by them. So it's the question, what does politics do for you? And I think in the Western parts, it's more about, well, you know, organizing stuff and being moderators. And like, if you think of people, at least the Germans in the audience will know what I'm speaking of, like Bouffier, Kretschmann, Laschet, Weil, who are the big prime ministers of the big states. They are really moderate types. And that's what a lot of people in Western Germany are comfortable with. Whereas in Eastern Germany, although the head of states are mostly also more or less moderate people, the people who lead the non-center opposition are often very radical. So that is one feature of the unified Germany, which I think is quite important. Then you asked about the impact of the unified Germany on the EU, and you already hinted to the point that a lot more expectations are addressed towards Germany, whereas Thatcher and Mitterrand still were a little bit afraid of the giant force in the middle of the continent. Nowadays, people expect Germany to not only finance, but also to lead. And Germany is very reluctant about that. And that is partially something very likable, that we're not trying to be the big power in the center and repeating the mistakes we have made in history. But there's also some problems connected to that. And one of the problems is that there's this very strong connection of France and Germany. And this leads to a sort of hegemony inside Europe, which is very unsound, because you have a lot of countries who would rely on Germany to make their cause. Like the Frugal Four, for example, we had those just recently: Austria, Denmark, Netherlands, and Sweden. Or the New Hanseatic League, including also Finland and Baltics and Ireland. So countries which have a different approach then France or even the southern European states, they need an ally, and they lost Britain over Brexit, and Germany is not really willing to side with them. But I think it would be good for the internal balance in the European Union if Germany were to break up this, it's a sort of a cartel with France. And finally, you also asked about the question of Europe or Germany as a champion of Europe in the world. And I think what is really important there is something which our foreign minister has been starting. And I mean, not at all a friend of the SPD, but I think this one point was very smart of him, and I would look forward to expanding this. And this is the Alliance for Multilateralism. So I think in order to keep up with states like the United States, China, or maybe even partially Russia, we need to focus on the features which really make Europe strong. And that is that Europe is flexible and adaptable. It's like a flotilla of different ships which can easily shift and easily move, as opposed to China or the US. And we need to find allies around the world, countries like Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, Israel, and so on, but also maybe those who are not like completely democratic yet, but whom we can win over to flexibly try to shape this world in a more open and more democratic and more market-friendly way.
Thank you so much, Clemens, also for reminding us about the diversity of Germany, and that's a very important aspect. People sometimes have a very different opinion of Germany. Instead, what you said is exactly what we are in front of us. And Germany is also showing up as an example of that diversity, unlike some other states where there are in problems. You mentioned correctly, I think, and I share very much the fact that with the exit of the Great Britain, Germany risks to become, together with a weaker France, the only point for all the other countries. And even in Italy, you know, we look at Germany as, in a way, it's like that always Germany taking care of things, but at the end, we hope that Germany will go first, you know, and please go first and take care of the problem. Let me move to Michael or Michael. You know, I call you Michael because I love calling you Michael. A guest now. It's the third time you are here. It seems that we don't have other guests, but always calling Mike. But that's because of the inputs you bring into the discussion. So, Mike, you see this from a taxpayer perspective. That's always the bad perspective because taxpayers complain everywhere around the world. As a taxpayer, representing taxpayers, how did you experience this union? And of course, the European Union as well. I know that you have a very skeptical approach to this. So please, let us know.
Thank you very much, Pietro. If you want, I can share part of my screen. If it works, let's have a look.
Let's try. Otherwise, we need Martin.
No, I don't think so. Do you see it?
Here, because I know Martin. Oh, here he is.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Wonderful.
just some charts. I will go through these slides. So you were right. Someone has to pay the bill. So it was already mentioned. For sure, there was no alternative besides the unification. It was right decision, but the approach was wrong. The changing rate and all these things. And also today with the Constitutional Court, we suffer with the state takes and other things because we didn't realize that there are a lot of differences which could not be gapped in a short period of time. And money is not everything. And if it comes like this, it was one of our campaigns, stop burning money, taxpayers' money. And we think lots of money was invested in to generate growth in the eastern part of Germany. And it didn't work. So it was not, how to say, what we expected, what we hoped. And I don't have to tell about the actual situation and also the crisis, that the crisis actually is misused. But what I want to show is this is our debt clock of Germany. That's including the debt, actual increase of the debt faced to Corona pandemic. We have now, the debt clock is running with more than 10,000 euro per second. Is an increase of our debt. That's a huge amount, and a big part of this debt is related to the unification. And if you look what was the impact of the debt in Germany, if you look here with 1990, that was around 400 billion euro, and now if you look to 2017, before the corona, it was 4 times more. Though we had a huge increase of the debt in Germany, faced also to the unification. A lot of money was paid and a lot of transfer payments, and we had also solidarity surcharge was implemented to finance the unification, and that's a very interesting chart. The yellow one is the increase of revenues out of the solidarity surcharge, and the blue one is what is spent to have increase and better economic conditions in eastern part of Germany. And if you see this year, no single euro out of this extra solidarity surcharge is going into the eastern part of Germany. So this is a benefit faced to the unification, to our finance minister. We always say he's stealing money out of the pocket of the taxpayers, because if you don't spend for the unification anymore money, you should not tax people face to this tax. It should be stopped. We went to a constitutional court, but we didn't win yet. We hope that we will win, but until this, people have to pay for it, have still to pay for the unification. And if you travel through Eastern Germany and to Western Germany, invite you also around Munich, use our highways, have a look which nice infrastructure was built in the eastern part of Germany. Though the money was anyhow spent well to have a better infrastructure, but on the other hand, other parts of Germany had not the chance to have this development. And also, if you look to the tax revenues in total, last year we had a record revenues around 800 billion, and then we had Corona. It's going down, but in the next 2 years we will recover if the finance ministry and Minister Scholz is right, and we will have more revenues than before. But actually there's a very strong discussion to increase taxation, tax pressure, and what is really, really bad. And then if you also look to the tax rate, it was there was an increase yet to more than 28%. So and what was paid, what was already mentioned, the unification, everything was paid out of the budget of the federal western part of Germany. We didn't set up separate budgets. So if you look to the social spending transfer payments, there was an increase from 90 to 2020, and that it's a huge increase. So we have also a deficit, and we have to finance this part of spending by taxes, tax revenues. This will burn our budget too, and that was the solidarity surcharge. That's the total amount what is benefiting our finance minister. And I want to close with a nice cartoon. That's a taxation. That's we mission completed. That's our finance minister Scholz. I don't want to be taxed, but that's reality, and we have a big discussion. That's what I want to end with real estate tax, because there's a big difference in eastern part, the wealth, and in western part, and there must be a new regulation. It should be revenue neutral, what was promised. But now, faced to Corona, we fear that there will be an increase of real estate tax and also more bureaucracy, and someone has to pay the bill. And the cartoon says, no, not expropriation. So I don't tax you until you have nothing left, but only some tax burden. And the reality is the taxpayers have to pay the bill. And I think Germany is on a turning point. We have to look what we can do with our economy, because with the climate package and all the Green Deal things, we lose our industry, the power of the car industry and other industries. And I think this will be also have an impact to Europe, because if we become weaker, we have less money and surplus, so we can only contribute less. So I hope we will recover, and there will be changes in the tax politics, not an increase of taxes. Less taxation is, I think, much better. And I want to close with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Before going to Matthew Edwards instead, who's based in Vienna right now, it seems from your words, and I'm a bit provocative, but I have some facts, that we shouldn't celebrate so much here. We used the wrong title, okay? So we'll probably, in our work in progress, we'll change the title of our invitation here. But I'm coming back with you with a more provocative question later on. So be ready, stay tuned, as we say. Let me move to Vienna.
Any questions, welcome.
I know, because I know the answer. Matthew Edwards is a UK citizen, and I found it out today. And he's based in Vienna, and he works. Is the founder of ViennEast, and obviously he's bringing in also the perspective of a UK citizen of a Brexit who has instead in Vienna, and who's definitely looking at the unification of Germany with external or foreign eyes. So based on my three questions, and also on, of course, what we have heard here, Matthew, do you agree with most of what he said? Do you see this? Do you have this pessimistic approach? I would say Clemens would probably correct me, but I saw him more optimistic than Gunther and Michael. As a foreigner, now I would say a foreigner in Europe, do you agree with them, or do you think, well, big steps have been done and I think we can celebrate?
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for the introduction. I'm just I'm just a director at ViennEast rather than the founder. But I come at this, as you say, with a slightly external background, and I'm looking at what Germany has, what the reunification of Germany has meant really for outside of Germany. I wouldn't presume to comment on things within Germany. I've had to listen to lots of people from outside of the UK commenting about the UK over the last couple of years due to Brexit, so I'll hold off the return. As an analyst, I have a tendency to, if I smell roses, I look for the grave that they've been laid on. In that respect, yes, I'm more on the pessimistic side. I'm more on the, I look at the problems that some of the unification has led to in the last 20, 30 years, as well as the successes. I think that in particular for Europe, for much of the last 30 years, certainly the first 20, Germany was a silent hole in middle of Europe. And I use the word both whole meaning unified and whole meaning gap. As already mentioned, the very strong historical reasons why Germany has not sought within the European Union to lead or have a louder voice. But I think what the reunification has meant is that there has then been an absence of leadership in a very visible way. And that's been one of the things about reunification, or 30 years ago, is it's also the end of what were obviously two very different systems, most obviously in Germany with the FDR and the GDR, but also in Europe more widely, both opposing economic systems to opposing ideological systems. Over the last 30 years, that has left a absence of a need to have an argument in many parts of Europe, especially prior to the global financial crisis. There has been an assumption that the correct liberal democratic economic capitalist system has been found. And I think the real challenge that the first 20 years post-German unification have posed is that, in a way, we in Europe and in Germany sat back on our laurels. We assumed, the victory had been won against the East, against socialism, against communism. The correct system had been found, and a lot of the benefits from that, frankly, have been squandered. While the weather was good, we didn't fix our roofs collectively, both in Europe and in Germany. Michael showed the slides showing the outstanding rise in German debt. And yet we all know that that's one of the more positive graphs that debt from Europe could be showing. So I think there's that element of it. I think also what the reunification has meant is that there's been an absence of hard-nosed realism in many cases. We've stopped, both in Germany and more widely, of having to talk or operate in realist political dynamics. That's come back over the last few years. You know, the language of Machtpolitik, it's there. But Europe and the reunified Germany has not been comfortable dealing with that, and still isn't. And that is leading to real problems, I think, for Europe, in particular dealing with China, in particular relating to the US. And it is one that I think is going to continue for some time. Back to you, Peter.
Thanks so much, Matthew. Gunther, let me come back to you because I see that there is a fil rouge here. I wouldn't say pessimism, and it's not probably the right word, but in a way I have to summarize what you guys are expressing here with very solid arguments. But we talk, and you started raising the issue, Gunther, of the debt. Now, what would be the solution to this big debt? That is a German debt, is a European debt. I'm talking from Italy, is an Italian debt. What could be the solution, and what would be the step forward from a unified Germany? Because unlike Brexit, where UK basically left, I don't see a disunification of Germany. So that's the direction you took, and it probably will last for centuries to go. What are the next steps to be taken, according to you? Microphone, Gunther. Now we should hear you. Wonderful.
So do you hear me? Yes.
Now perfectly and clear.
Okay. So there are two solutions to the debt problem. So there's a honest one and a less honest one. The honest one would be to cut expenditure. Yeah, because Germany has taken a lot of expenditure obligations, and these expenditure obligations has driven up debt. And if you want to reduce debt, you have to reduce the expenditure obligations. That's very easy. But it seems to me that our government some years ago has taken a different part, and the solution is that the European Central Bank will buy the debt. And we can continue to raise debt because the European Central Bank is committed to buy increasing amounts of government debt. And then the question is, what will be the consequence for Europe? And Europe has to be aware that the big financial power of Germany in the past has been backed by a very hard currency. The German mark was always a hard currency, and because the German mark was always under appreciation pressure, this forced the German enterprises to be very productive. And the high productivity level of the German industry generated very large financial resources, which were partially used to solve problems in Europe. But now if we get a soft currency, because debt is monetized by the European Central Bank, we are going to lose our high productive industry, and therefore we are going to lose the basis to solve the problems in Germany and in all over Europe. And I think this will lead to very strong distribution conflicts, both within Germany and both within in Europe. And therefore, I think Germany, together with other European countries, with respect to its policy stance on monetary policy making, has taken the wrong path. So I would expect in the upcoming years, very strong distribution conflicts in Germany and within Europe, because the German industry will be much less productive because it's mainly zombified with cheap money issued by the ECB.
Thank you, Gunther. Clemens, I'm not coming to you first. I'm going to Michael because I see him with his hand, so I assume you have a comment. And of course, the question is, do you agree with this perspective? But then the other comment, the question I have straight for you, Michael, is, Are you happy with this reunification?
Please, I didn't hear you. The question.
The first question is if you have anything to add, because I saw you raising your hands earlier. If you agree with Gunther or you have any comment. And the second question, a very straight one, and apologize, but I know you like my spirit, is, are you happy with this reunification?
It's a very good question. No, for sure.
Or a bad question.
No, but for sure. As I when I started, said there was no alternative. It's one Germany, so it was right to have this unification. But I think what we expected, the power of Eastern Germany, we expected more than we got. But that's a big problem. And there was this transfer system. We spent a huge amount of money to have an increase and to generate growth in Eastern part. And I think it was not the right master plan, and was already mentioned by Gunther. So also on the European level, if you have this transfer payment model, there's a high risk. Now we finance this, we print money finally. The money is not covered by gold, by nothing. So we have now the ECB, and we have an increase of M3, and I think there's a high risk, and the interest rates will have to stay low, because otherwise we have state bankruptcies. That's the biggest problem, and so I think we had no revenue problem. What is now mentioned by left-wing politicians, we need more and higher taxes. We have now debts on a European level, first time, to finance Corona. It's only one single virus, and we implement 750 billion debt, and we implement a digital tax, a carbon dioxide tax, plastic tax, because we have to do something on the European level. And I think this, to tax, someone has to pay it. It's not own resources. A politician from the Netherlands said last time when van der Leyen was speaking in the parliament, be honest, don't talk about own resources. It's taxation. Someone has to pay the bill. And if we spend now with Corona, in my chart, I can send this presentation to you. If you want, you can spread it. We have more than 216 billion now new debt this year for Germany. Only 1/3 was used. But our finance minister, he's asking for more money for next year, and we will have an increase of debts. And we have more money going into our system. And I think this is long term. Someone has to pay the bill. And with the Brexit, we have a huge problem. All politicians love to change now the voting system to stop the anonymity decision. So a majority will have to decide in future. That's what they plan. But what they forget, with Great Britain, we had always a balance of power, eastern, northern part of European countries. Now, those who are able to pay have nothing to say anymore. And this will not be a peace project if we have this banking system, European banking system, European transfer system, European debts. I think this is the wrong approach. And we pay the bill with the taxpayers, with zombie corporates, low interest rates. And it is against all economic theory. And I hope there will be a renaissance of values. And we fight for this because we want lower taxes, more economic freedom. Thank you.
Thank you. And it seems, Michael, it seems that, and I'm moving to Clemens, and of course, I want to join Martin here, asking if there are any questions either from Facebook or coming in from Zoom. This is a very interesting discussion, and we are seeing that we're celebrating Germany. I want to celebrate Germany, but we are facing, big challenges still ahead. And Michael, you know how much I share the fact that, and I told you once already, the Italians won on this because let's say government has been able to move taxes in Europe now. Now the European Union has to create taxation, European taxation. So there will be even a double level. And if we think about Italy, we have a local level, regional level, national level, and now a European level of taxation. And that's that's an interesting challenge that we have ahead. And I was smiling before when Gunther was speaking, not for disrespect, but because I was thinking about the government here in Italy, the governments with the final S. And I was thinking about all the discussion around the frugal countries and how now, finally with the recovery plan and with the fact that we have a pandemic, we have to stop this frugal attitude and we have to start again, pumping in, the famous helicopter money. So Clemens, I'm coming to you, and I know, Michael, you want to add something, but I promise I leave you the last word for the last statement for us. Clemens, there is one question that was given to me here, and the question is, here it comes, is unification something that should be celebrated from a libertarian perspective, or does it make more sense to aim for smaller political units and therefore secession? Matthew, how do I pronounce that? Secession?
Yeah, well, thank you. First of all, I really enjoy being the spoilsport in these kind of discussions and just rooting for optimism. Because looking backwards, actually, we have still quite some reason for optimism, which doesn't mean that there are not problems, but there are problems which we can solve and which we have been able to adapt to and solve over the past 2000 years. So I'm confident we will adapt to the future. I don't know who brought up this question, somebody maybe who knows me. And I hinted at the beginning of my comment, my first comment, at the point that we had another unification in Germany 150 years ago. And when I listen to people talking about the European Union now, I'm often reminded of the rhetoric and the arguments of those days 150 years ago when Bismarck forged an empire of blood and iron, which didn't do well. Neither Germany or what they call Germany nor the continent of Europe. And I think that is part of the problem. And I mean, Michael just talked about the problem of European taxation. And that is exactly what Germans imposed then back in 1871, 1872. They started a fiscal system which was centralized, and they centralized responsibilities, and they took actual responsibility from the smaller units. And that was a system which evolved and evolved over time. We can see the same thing in the United States, which started off as a very, very federal, decentralized system, and then over time centralized ever more. And that always means more redistribution. It always means less actual responsibility, because the amount of money that you can deal with is so huge, and the people who can benefit from it are so many that nobody questions the system anymore. So actually, I would say what we can learn from the German unification is maybe to get back to the federal system, to get back to a more subsidiary system in Germany, but also in the European Union. And that is actually the European heritage. That's what made Europe great, that we always had these small units, flexible units, different units where you could vote by feet, by just going to another part of Europe because they had a better solution for your problems. And we need to regain this understanding of European problem solution. That's why I slightly disagree with Matthew's call for Machtpolitik, because I think Machtpolitik is not something that Europe or Germany can actually do. We are much better in, serving our interests by giving small units as much power, as much responsibility as possible, because that's the flexible and creative system which brings up innovation.
Thank you very much, Clemens. And Matthew, I'm coming to you, and of course you will receive the well-argued provocation, and we're again in our critical thinking spirit here. We need to discuss. Michael knows when we agree too much, that's not good. So it's good that we somehow disagree to improve our knowledge and discussion. But before you think about your answer, let me also read a question for you by Scott, and I think it fits exactly for you. Meanwhile, there is a comment by Christophe Ledel is not a question, so I'm not reading it, but it's in the question and answer section. So please, if you want to read it, it's there. Otherwise, there is a question from Scott. Scott says, given Germany's debt problems and the country's enduring divisions, to what extent is it possible and or desirable for Germany to take a greater leadership role in Europe and adopt more realist policies along the lines Matthew mentioned it? Of course, this is what you mentioned, so this question is exactly for you.
I mean, two things. One, what I said was that there's an absence of using the tools, especially externally. Not necessarily, I'm certainly not saying within Europe, you know, but when other countries in the world are using the tools of realist international relations and frankly do work with the language of Macpolitik and tools of that, we have to understand that avoiding them is not really going to be a successful, sustainable option. In a way, we need to be bifocused so that you've got the willingness to use those tools, that language, where it needs to be. And within the, shall we say, more the environment in which it works, using some of the more tools that have been used in the European Union and so on. Your comment, Clemens, about returning to smaller constituencies, returning to smaller units, I mean, from my perspective, I'd be completely happy with that. I think, you know, local, having more responsibility at a local level or at a sub-national level is generally a good thing. My concern about some of the, and in answer to Scott's question, my concern about the level of debt in Germany and playing a leading role is that it's not just the debt, it's demographics as well. And I think this is something that both Germany and Europe is going to have to confront, and it's one that people don't want to. For understanding, it's a long-term, slow issue, and it gets into very uncomfortable policy lines of talking about population policies. But it's one we've already seen that yeah, East Germany's population is declining. Germany's population is going to, as a whole, is going to start declining. The ability to either pay its debt or be able to carry the load for the rest of Europe, how much longer is that possible? Debt's fine when you can grow your way out of it. We just look at Japan and we can see how problematic the idea of growing out of debt is when you've got a declining population. This is absent the population levels in Eastern Europe and indeed, Pietro, in Italy and the South. So I think throwing the idea of carrying Europe's debts on Germany, no, I mean, I would not support that, but you know, I don't have a vote in EU elections anymore, so I'm disenfranchised, even though I am a taxpayer.
Thank you, Matthew, so much. We are running out of time. We're at 18:49. Gunther, do you want to add anything, any comments just to end our discussion here? Because then I need to go to Michael that has a comments to make, and he made it clear that he has one.
Yeah, just would add two aspects for financing growing expenditure of Germany. There are, of course, two different alternative ways, except taxes. You can reduce the real interest rates or charge negative interest rates on the Germans because they have a lot of savings. And that's currently what the ECB is doing. But much more problematic is the depression of wages. So depressed wages in specific of young people. And I think that's currently happening not only in Germany, but all over Europe. And in my way, in my point of view, that's the wrong way to go because the young people are our future. And it's not a good idea to shift the burden of this European social states and European monetary integration process to the young people.
Thank you, Gunther, so much. And I have to say, I share very much the fact that we are loading the debt on the young generation. As Matthew said, it's always smaller young generation. That's an issue we have to face. Michael, I want to leave the floor to you for the last few, I would say seconds, but minutes, but very few minutes, in thanking all the others for being here with us. And then I will again recap to our discussion. But please, let's say that we want to celebrate. It's also Thanksgiving in the United States, so we should be a bit happy today.
No, I'm more than happy with the unification, but I think we have to be honest, and we have always to talk about the failures and lessons learned, and what could be done. Also, if you have new members of the European Union, or if you want to implement a transfer payment system as planned now, look what is wrong in Germany. So you need incentives to be very productive, and not to be consumptive, to try to get out of most money you can get. And I think that's really a big problem. And if you look to the politicians today, I have looked to try to translate it. Increasingly, they put nappies. If you have a baby, then it needs these nappies. So we call it pamper. So the state has to do everything from child to pensioner. And what politicians forget, someone has to finance it. You can do it by printing money for a certain period of time, but our children or grandchildren or their children have to pay the bill finally. And for that reason, we need a renaissance, from my point of view, from the taxpayers' point of view, of values. What was mentioned, I think, by Clemens, subsidiarity principle, the basic principles of the European Union. First, you're responsible your own. I am responsible my own. Not the state is completely responsible to me. We cannot privatize profits and socialize debts. It's a complete wrong approach. To lose and not to failures belong to economic behavior. You need, if you have a bankruptcy, that's a normal situation. So we stand up, continue, create a new job, create new business, but now we try to keep this status in the European level and to harmonize everything. And I think harmonization is against competition, and we need competition for innovation, and innovation leads us to more growth and more wealth for all. And my aim is more wealth, more growth, and this leads to more tax revenues, and then we have tax cuts and a better climate for investment and for people. So I strongly believe everybody of us is better to spend the money than the state. You know what you have to do with the money, and I do not trust the state. I dislike if the state tells me what I have to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Let me thank very much, starting from Clemens, Gunther, Matthew for being here with us, and of course, Michael, but let me thank particularly our guests that are following us for the entire hour here on Zoom or on Facebook. This event is being recorded, so will remain available. I want to thank, of course, Victoria, Britt, Martin for making this possible, and our great friend and queen, Barbara, and my team here in Rome for making this possible. I think it's been a very fascinating discussion. It's not over here. Germany is still the country we all love, but it's still the locomotive of Europe, and it's still running Europe. So we always look at Germany and getting some answer from there. Of course, particularly after, guys, let me say this, after I heard the president of France saying that yesterday Maradona was dead and he's God. So after we hear a president of a European major country saying that the football player was like God, well, I think we have some concerns about our politician and how Europe is going to be led. But we have to be positive, of course. We have a long journey ahead. We will continue with the Austrian Economics Monthly. I hope you guys from the panel that, again, I want to thank you. You will be joining us in another occasion. As I said, it's a long journey, but today is also Thanksgiving in the United States, a big challenge in the United States as well. Let's see how it goes up and how it turns up for Europe as well. Now it's 6 o'clock, so let me thank everybody and see you next month, hopefully before. I don't think we see before Christmas. Britt will correct me. Otherwise, we'll see each other in January. Otherwise, be safe, stay safe, and see you very soon. Bye.